On this episode of Star Trek Universe, I am talking to 29-year-old Christianna Traynor, who has just finished watching Star Trek, the original series, and the animated series for the first time. She'll be fielding questions from myself and the listeners about her insights and reactions after these words from our mystery sponsors. Welcome into Star Trek Universe, the show where normally you get to listen in on two lifelong friends do what they've been doing since they were 6 years old, talk about Star Trek, except, like I said, this time's a little different. I'm your host, David C. Robertson. My guest name is Christianna Traynor. She teaches English in Tokyo. She is a huge fan of Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, and animation, and happens to be my sister-in-law. Thanks for being here, Christy.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Are you? I sent you the questions. You're like on the spot. And like when I thought of this episode, I was like, it would be really cool to get basically an outsider's perspective, like someone coming into the franchise. Because I grew up with it. I don't remember a time where I wasn't watching Star Trek. I think my first memories of it are at like 3 years old, so I have no concept of life without Star Trek. I remember being little and going like, why does Captain Kirk have a belly? Like, and my mom, God bless her, would say, oh, those are just muscles. They were not muscles, ladies and gentlemen. Before you started watching the original series, Christy, what was your relationship with Star Trek? Like, had you ever seen any Star Trek before? What was your impression of the show before you started?
Yes, I had seen some Star Trek before. I watched the Chris Pine movies as they were released.
Okay.
So the first Chris Pine movie was the first Star Trek thing I had watched, unless you count bits and pieces that I saw when I was a kid that my mom watched on TV. But like I didn't actually watch those. I just remember seeing them in the house. So I watched the Chris Pine movies. I loved the Chris Pine movies, and I still do love the Chris Pine movies. And watching those is what really made me interested in getting into the greater franchise and watching the other Star Trek things.
Mm-hmm.
The series, the original one, and the ones to follow. And also I had to watch an episode of, sorry, I don't know which Star Trek series it's from, but it's the one that's about linguistics. Does that mean you something and Tanagra?
Oh, Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra, Next Generation, season 5, episode 1. Yeah,
that is correct. Yes. So that was an assignment for one of my linguistics classes.
Well, that makes sense.
Yes,
that's a good episode. Did you enjoy that episode?
I really, really loved it. Yeah.
Okay. So did you have a different, based off of the Chris Pine movies and that one TNG episode that you watched, did you have a different perspective or did you have a different expectation for what the original series was going to be?
Like a different expectation going in than what it ended up being?
Right.
Maybe a little bit. Some of the more surprising aspects of it maybe had been spoiled by gifts, such as, William Shatner's really crazy acting.
Mm-hmm.
But I maybe didn't expect how much fun like all the exploration was. And like if you compare the original series to the movies of course are much more cinematic, and they are much more like there's a big plot and there's action all happening together. But each of the episodes are like, they're not always action, they're not always
right,
like quite as exciting as the movies may be. And there's like a lot of contemplation in the original series, I'd say, that's not so much in the movies.
No, do you think that's a detriment to the movies or a detriment to the original series?
I don't think I'd say it's a detriment to either of them, because they're both different mediums.
Okay.
So in the original series, since they're episodes, like you can have them be like contained stories and like there can be a flow. But in the movies, like it's all contained into one 2-hour time span. So like it needs to have all of those things.
Well, you like a lot of different properties. You're a geek, so some of the pitfalls of fandom. And as I'm sure can assume, there are lots of Star Trek fans who say that one of the big pitfalls of the movies is that they lack the contemplation that they feel is integral to Star Trek. And usually that's condensed down to a complaint of they turned Star Trek into Star Wars, which I think is a little unfair because I think Star Wars has a fair amount of contemplation as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, and let us not forget that, like, what was it? Episode 2 was pretty much nothing but a bunch of aliens sitting around a boardroom, like, which is what Star Trek is often accused of, is just a bunch of old dudes sitting around a table talking about politics.
Right.
Which I'm fine with either way, I guess. So, how much of, and this is a little bit like what was your impression of the show, but like how much of the sort of the iconic staples in like the zeitgeist, like in pop culture, was overblown to you? Like, what did you go in like saying like, oh, this is going to be what this is, and then it was a little tweaked, it was different, you know?
I think maybe the most I've heard about Star Trek, the original series, or I had heard before seeing it, was like people emphasizing how big a deal it was at the time for how much diversity was on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, yeah, there's definitely diversity on the show, but within the show itself, that's not like super emphasized.
Yeah.
So like the way people emphasize it outside of the show kind of doesn't match the vibe of the show. Like if I hadn't had people emphasize that to me, I probably wouldn't have thought while watching it, oh, this was made in the 60s and it's a big deal that there's a Black woman in a like high position on the ship.
Right. Yeah. Which, you know, is what's interesting about that is it is very subtle. They don't go into like, you know, here's the Black lady on the bridge.
Right.
But it was, you know, we had a Japanese guy on the bridge, we had a Russian guy on the bridge during the Cold War, we had, you know, a Black woman in the middle of civil rights. Like they were kind of hitting some big things
Yeah.
at the time and not really making it a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Except for Chekhov's weird, you know, feelings that everything originated in Russia, which that was odd, but I always enjoyed it. All right. So Dave Murdoch on Twitter wants to know, what do you think Star Trek is about? I feel like this is kind of a roasting question. Like this is,
oh, wow.
He's coming in for the kill.
I think there's a right answer to this, and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to give the right answer. So forgive me in advance.
Well, there's a right
is.
There is I feel personally, and look, I'm a pariah, so I feel like there's the correct answer, and then there's the quote unquote right answer that you're supposed to say. But give me yours.
I think that it is about exploration for sure. And it's about like learning about different types of people and learning how their differences can be like a good thing and a bad thing, and what you can learn from those differences. I think it's obviously about like space and other species and like cool adventure things. But I think as far as the original series goes, like there's a lot of, you know, the crew on the Enterprise like learning about each other and growing together, and then like how the other planets and species that they meet influence them.
Okay, I'll go with that. I'll say okay.
Okay.
See, I think the correct answer is about making money.
Well, yeah, that's true, but apparently the original series didn't do that very well.
Well, I mean, that depends on who you talk to, because the thing is like they weren't going by the Nielsen ratings. They were going by a precursor to it, and they thought it was doing really poorly. According to some, they thought it was doing really poorly, and then they turned around and looked at it after they went and started the Nielsen ratings after the show had been canceled. They said, "Oh, well, this was killing in this demographic. This absolutely would have been renewed." But you know, it really did take off in syndication in the 70s. So, yeah, I don't know. It just depends on who you talk to. Christopher Glennon, or Chris L. Glennon on Twitter, says, what did Star Trek do that you've never seen anywhere else? And that's a tough question, because in this day and age, you've seen pretty much everything.
Yeah, that's really hard. I can name a lot of things that I have seen in other places that seemed like maybe they were influenced by Star Trek. As far as that I haven't seen, that's really hard. I I don't think I've seen wigs as crazy as the ones they used on Star Trek.
Okay.
I'll say the wigs.
The wigs.
Yeah.
Like I said, man.
That's the best. That's the best answer I've got. Wigs and styrofoam rocks.
Oh my gosh, the styrofoam rocks. I am absolutely in awe of the set designers because there are like interviews you could see.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in my teens, for the first time ever, like the Sci-Fi Channel put on this. They aired every episode of the original series without with everything fully restored. Like when it went to syndication, they cut out little bits of the original broadcast to make room for more commercials.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, they've cut out more and more and more. And so they aired it and for the first time since this original run in its entirety. And in between, they would block off like an hour and a half for every episode. They would have interviews with cast and crew. And some of those were really interesting because you'd have guys talking about how they, that was around the time that they discovered or that they started shipping out big printers for companies, and they would have the styrofoam casing around the printers. And they were taking all that styrofoam and using it and spray painting it and sticking it on walls and stuff to be alien tech. And one of my favorite stories is they needed panels. They needed panels that look like dials. They went to the commissary and got the plastic lids for coffee cups.
Gosh.
And like those are glued to the wall in certain episodes. Like I love that kind of stuff. Like that is shoestring budget up my alley. Like what can your creativity do to make this, to sell this,
Yeah.
Larry Nemecek from this is the guy. Larry is a huge Trekkie, whatever you want to call it. He ran Star Trek Communicator magazine, which was a magazine that I subscribed to as a lad.
Wow, that's awesome.
So man, he's got a question for you.
Okay. I hope I answer
it. You put on the pressure. What was your biggest surprise, positive, negative, and neutral?
Oh my. Oh, okay. Honestly, I think this could be positive and negative, is William Shatner's acting.
Okay, I can see that.
I mean, like, just wow. His acting was so crazy. Sometimes it was so, I don't want to say bad. It like he just overacts so much. It's so memorable and so notable, but I would not change it for anything. Like, it's fantastic. I love it. It's so great. It's sometimes hilarious, sometimes almost like endearing. It's just ridiculous. I think it adds so much flavor to the show. Whether or not he actually was supposed to be overacting so much, I don't know, but I loved it and thought it was terrible at times.
I can see that. Like, to me, that there are strange instances where it seems like you can't just like go all in and say he is a bad actor. And because there are times where he's very subtle and he's playing it very straight and he's very like in tune with the tone of the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are times you're just like, I don't know what I'm watching right now. And he's off the wall. He's bouncing. He's going crazy. And Shatner has said that, and many others have corroborated this, that they would like Roddenberry would run back and start rewriting the episode, and they would be on set waiting for the new scenes. And he wouldn't have time to remember his lines, so he would do these great big pauses because he was trying to remember the next line. And which is what's funny is like in one of his autobiographies, he said that that's pretty much what got him, like, catapulted him into fame. Is he was doing this I think it was King Lear with Christopher Plummer, and he was the understudy, and Plummer had like appendicitis or something, and he knew the thing by heart, but he got up there and his nerves just like clenched on him. He didn't know, and he just started doing like the dramatic pauses, like he was just really feeling it. And he got written up, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, he just, look at how he did this, and it was so dramatic and fantastic." And the next thing you know, he's doing like live plays in the 50s on television and stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
But yeah, I believe him. I think that's probably exactly what happened, because
Yeah.
Roddenberry was kind of a nut about changing other people's scripts.
Hmm. Well, at least
So
his style was consistent.
sometimes, but I think it does get worse the later the episode, like the later the show goes. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
yeah. Funnest Frontier podcast at Dex Lower on Twitter says, "What is your first impressions of the crew, starting with Spock?"
Hmm. Spock. So, okay, part of this maybe will be like a comparison between the Chris Pine movies and the original series, because the Chris Pine movies were my original
Yeah,
um, exposure. So
that's fair.
I'd say my impression would be of, yeah, like comparing them. In the Chris Pine movies, like everybody's, I mean, I guess they're all younger. Most of them are. So Spock and Kirk, like they don't have the close relationship that they do in the original series. So watching the original series, it was a little bit of a surprise to me to see like how chill they were, because they're a lot
Yeah,
older, they're seasoned, like they're mature, and I
yeah.
know that's like part of the point, like the whole difference in them and everything. But so yeah, my impression of Spock was, oh, like he's really he's not like struggling to figure out who he is and like to actually be the Vulcan that he wants to be. He's like kind of already made it there. And he's just like growing as like in his place on the Enterprise and at Kirk's side. And then I would say for Kirk, definitely that he is like, the charming, charismatic, like good leader of a captain that you want to see leading the Starship Enterprise, and that he's sometimes crazy and he takes like really crazy risks. And I like how like those qualities were adapted into the Chris Pine movies as well. And I would say for Uhura, she's cool. I like her in the original series, but I don't feel like she gets a lot of time to actually be much of a character. Like there are a couple episodes where she's featured, but
Yeah.
she kind of, to me, like my impression of her is that she's the lady on the bridge who answers questions and like helps them communicate and
Yeah.
like run comms and stuff. But she doesn't have like a whole lot of notable character for me. Sulu, he's great. I thought he was hilarious. I love him. Yeah,
Okay.
that's Sulu. Scotty.
All right.
Scotty is also crazy. He's a lot of fun. He has a lot of like techno babble and he does it pretty well, but
Yeah.
fun. And I like his relationship with Kirk and like the chats that they have. McCoy, he's very stoic, and I thought his thing with Spock, like how often they kind of argued and debated, was interesting, especially when it's juxtaposed with his thing with Kirk and how close they are.
Yeah.
Have I missed anyone? Oh, Chekhov.
Check off.
Chekhov he seemed like he's maybe, is he the youngest? He
Yeah.
seemed like he was the youngest.
Is
And you can
definitely,
tell
yeah.
he's the youngest. He's definitely given some storylines that kind of emphasize his youth and maybe immaturity. And it seemed like he had a lot of growing to do. And that poor boy's hair.
They wanted him to look like Davy Jones from the Monkees.
Well, I don't know.
They gave him a wig.
Again with the wigs.
Yeah. Chris Balga from the World's Finest True Believers podcast wants to know, what would you have liked to see them do in either series, TOS or TAS?
Man.
I would assume that they didn't do.
Yeah. Okay, I'm kind of going to cheat a little bit. I would have liked to see some of the things they did in TAS done in TOS.
Like what?
So in TAS, because they didn't have the limitations of things being filmed and being physical, they could really have a lot more freedom with creativity of what the aliens looked like and what the environments looked like.
Yeah.
So it would have been awesome to see more of those elements in the original series visually, and even as far as the narrative goes, because I know they were limited by what they could do visually with their budget and with like the special effects at the time. So it would have been awesome to see non-humanoid and non-floating robot and non-styrofoam forms of aliens and environments in the original series.
Don't forget those gaseous clouds.
Yes.
There are always those those energy clouds.
Right.
I'll tell you this, like one of my favorite, I have two favorite alien species from the original series. One of them is the Horta. It was remember the silicone beast that was burrowing through tunnels and killing miners because it was trying to protect its babies. And it just looked like a rock that scooted along the ground. Do you remember this at all?
Yes, I do remember. Absolutely.
It just looked so alien and foreign. I was really into that.
Yeah.
And I love what I refer to as the pancake aliens that fly around and attach itself to Spock's back.
Oh, yes.
I don't remember what they're actually called, but but then they showed like the little X-ray and they showed the tendrils going up his spine and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's actually pretty nasty. Well done, original series. Edward of many fandoms at Edward111087 on Twitter says, what do you think about the sense of adventure, the allegorical nature of most episodes? Is it too on the nose or not enough?
I love the sense of adventure. I loved how well they did different stories in each episode, and like how creative they were with a lot of the plots, like whether it was an alien planet or the ones where they used actual Earth environments and like historical things. Those are really interesting and sometimes really crazy, like the one with like Lincoln.
The Savage Curtain.
Yes. Yeah, some of them were like really wacky and weird, but yeah, I love the sense of adventure. As far as the allegorical nature, I know it was there, but when I watch stuff like this, I don't like analyze it a whole lot. So I would say some of it was probably like I missed a lot of it because I wasn't looking for it. I just kind of watched the series casually. I wasn't like taking notes or anything. So some things were like really, really obvious, of course. And I thought they were interesting, but I like to watch things and just like, I prefer to not try to connect things to like the real world, if that makes sense. Like if it's fiction, I like to just watch it as what it is. And at least while I'm watching it at the time, I try not to think about like, oh, well, this is trying to say this and this is trying to say this.
Yeah. Well, you know, my favorite Star Trek is the Star Trek that does not push necessarily any kind of like message. It just presents the question.
Yeah.
You know, like one of my favorites in premise, not in execution, because the episode is kind of lacking. But there's an episode of the original series called A Private Little War, where the Klingons are arming one tribe, and Kirk knows someone from the other tribe, so he starts giving them guns, and McCoy is very opposed to it and says, you know, you're just creating a war. You know, if I don't, they're just going to kill them. They're going to kill all these people. And that was Vietnam, and they put that out while Vietnam was happening. You know, so. And they even kind of like, without saying Vietnam, or Vietnam War, they bring it up. Like Kirk's like, hey, do you remember these things that happened? And and McCoy's like, yes, I remember. It went on bloody year after bloody year. So I like stuff like that, where like the captain and the characters are faced with a moral quandary that makes you think of like, what should we be doing? And everyone's free to kind of come to their own conclusion and disagree with the captain, just as McCoy disagrees with Kirk, where Spock might say, you're both being illogical. I dig that kind of stuff. So I think, you know, with I like some of the allegory in some of those, and then like I appreciate the message of things like, you remember the one Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, with the two guys, one was black on one side and the other one was black on the other side.
Right.
And even as their entire civilization has destroyed itself, they're the last two people on their planet fighting to the death. Like, that was a little on the nose for me.
Yeah.
Like, I appreciate it. And I'm like, wow, I mean, I can see that. You know, I'm on Facebook and Twitter. Yeah, okay. But little too heavy for me.
Yeah, I would agree. I like it makes me think. That's cool. I just don't. Yeah, I think like you, I don't want to have it be so specific to an issue in the real world. I would rather, the thinking about like issues and morals and things like that, but not like, oh, this is specifically the Vietnam War.
Like I like being able to look at it from like 10 years down the line. You know, like I can understand some people who are like, I don't want to see COVID in television shows right now. I am not mad if people do that, but at the same time, like I think I appreciate it years later when I'm like, oh, like that was an interesting time. And of course they're going to do something that, but so to look at it and go, oh, this was a really big deal. Because back in those days, you weren't supposed to say anything negative about what the US was doing.
Yeah.
So to have them maybe hint at this might not be the best thing, this Vietnam crap. I appreciate that now, whatever it is, 60 years later.
Yeah.
It was gutsy.
Yes, definitely.
Like, I don't know if you've ever seen, there's an interview with Rod Serling with, I think, Mike Wallace way back, right before the Twilight Zone started.
Mm-hmm.
And he was explaining that he did Rod had done do you know who Rod Serling is? He's the guy from the Twilight Zone. Like the dude's always smoking a cigarette and talking, giving the intro and outro to the Twilight Zone. Do you know this guy?
Not really, but
sad. Anyway, he was explaining that like there was some play that he had put on that was televised, and they had to take, well, the story was about some sort of racial issue, and then they had to change the racial issue, and then but the allegory was still too strong because people were saying that they weren't going to air it if they had Coca-Cola sponsor it because Coca-Cola is affiliated with the South. And like he just kept like having to like whittle away at everything so that it didn't offend anyone.
Wow.
In 1950s America.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what like the original series was up against. And I think it's interesting that they got away with so much.
Yeah, that's true for sure.
And I wonder what they would have created if they didn't have to deal with censors, and it's funny because a lot of people these days complain about like, oh, well, Star Trek on streaming does all, X, Y, and Z, and they push agendas. But I'm like, this was on television in the 60s. It probably would have looked a lot like the original series where they were just so mired in allegory that, it would fly over a lot of people's heads.
Yeah.
Larry Nemechek again says, eventually, did you become more of a fan of the plot and themes? Were you a shipper? Meaning, did you ship different crew members and characters? Or were you a background canonista? And I'm not sure exactly what that means, but were you like really interested? I think it means, were you really interested in like how the world was set up and like the background minutia of the universe?
Okay, like background in universe, not background as in how they made the set designs.
Right, background in universe.
Okay. Sorry, what was the first option?
Were you more of a plot themes fan?
Okay. Definitely not a shipper. I am very rarely a shipper.
I knew that.
Yeah. The background stuff was definitely cool, but I'd say I was most into plot.
Okay.
But I think, background contributes to plot.
Yeah.
But overall, like the biggest thing for me would have been plot and like the characters themselves. I like a good story.
Yeah. I like McCoy and Spock yelling at each other, or McCoy yelling at Spock. That's my favorite thing. That and watching the ships fly by. I'm a bit of a dullard. Aaron Bossig on Twitter wants to know, what parts of the story would you like to see explained better?
Spock and his upbringing. I mean, there were some really cool episodes in both TOS and TAS that touched on his Vulcan background. So now I am talking about background. I would love to learn more about his upbringing and like his human mother, and see more about his childhood and we saw stuff about his childhood, and then we saw him when he was on the Enterprise. I would love to see like between those 2 points.
You will get to see a little bit of that in Discovery and Strange New Worlds.
Oh, great.
That is really far down the line
for
you. And of course, there are lots of people saying, they never mentioned that before. It's not canon. Every Star Trek title card at every Trek title on Twitter says, do the special effects of the time affect the enjoyment of the show? Did you watch it in its original form, or did you go with the remastered versions?
For the second part, I don't know. I watched whatever was on Netflix Japan.
That's probably the remastered. Oh,
Okay.
I'll ask you this: did the Gorn blink? The
Did
big the big green creature that Kirk had to fight on that planet, the
Yes.
lizard, did he
Uh-huh.
blink?
Oh gosh, I don't remember. That's a really specific question.
Did the ship look like CGI instead of a model? How about that?
I'd say maybe it looks like CGI. I want to say CGI.
Yeah. Like the original
I did
form.
notice there was some CGI.
Yeah, they didn't have any CGI back then, so it
Yeah, we did
was
actually
like
wonder about that. Like, wait, could they do this in the 60s?
no. They remastered the whole show in
Okay.
HD. They cleaned up the film file, the film strips, and recut it. And because they basically just remastered all the special effects.
Okay.
And one of the cool things about that is that they were able, like a lot of the episodes where they would say, like, oh, we've got an enemy ship. You would either never see the enemy ship, they would just never show you, or you
Mhm.
would see like a little white dot on the screen
Okay.
or something like, and now, but like the designers would actually like draw up these alien vessels and then they wouldn't have money to make them. They wouldn't have time or money to make them. So they would just fudge it. And, now some of these ships can be seen in the remastered versions.
Well, that's
And
cool.
it's a little bit of a, you know, Lucas Star Wars situation.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't mind it. One of the things I really love is that in the original form, they had probably 3 or 4 different models of the Enterprise, and they would just use stock footage. So from one shot to the next, the actual model would change. Like they had like the one they built for the pilot, which had different bussards on the nacelles. Sometimes the ship would have like these little like nubs on the end of the nacelles,
Hmm.
and then like the back of the nacelles would look different. The top of the saucer section would have different colors and different things. It was just always like nothing was continuity, because they would
Mm,
just like, we need this shot, okay, just throw in a random Enterprise shot. So they fixed all of that
I
in the remastered.
Okay.
But that's just one of my little hangups.
Okay. Okay.
But there were lots of little things like in the original, and I'm a little sad that you haven't experienced this. um in the non-remastered versions, they were real big on making, like they would have like that standard Enterprise flyby of above a planet, and every week it was like the planet was some like crazy color, like
Mm.
bright orange, here's the purple planet, and then they get down there and it's like Earth. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
But that adds to the flavor of the original series, I think, a little bit for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the special effects were definitely something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes, it's really hard to suspend your disbelief. I'm pretty good at suspending my disbelief, but sometimes, like, you see so many planets that have different colored, like, fog off in the background with
Uh-huh.
different colored styrofoam rocks. It's a little hard to keep seeing them as like different unknown planets.
Oh, they're all different unknown planets, Christy.
Right, of course.
There are more planets in the galaxy that have purple styrofoam rocks than you could ever
Uh-huh.
imagine.
Sure.
And if they don't, it just looks like Vasquez rocks in California. It reminds me of that Austin Powers where they were talking about how lovely the mountainside is or whatever, and he's like, it's amazing to me how little this looks like Southern California. It's just yeah. Captain Casey over on Twitter says, what drew you into TOS and what made you stay despite its datedness?
Well, the first part of it, if it hasn't been clear, definitely the Chris
The
Pine
Pine.
movies. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that got me into, the world of Star Trek. And then, yeah, those movies, and you convinced me to start watching the original series.
Yeah.
As far
Peer
as staying,
pressure.
yeah. I loved the first season. I loved the second season. The third season was a little harder to get through. That's why it took me a really, really long time.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can look past the low budget special effects and appreciate the writing and the plot and the story and the characters
Yeah.
and the universe that's created. Like, the visuals are nice to have, but it could even be like an audio drama and it would still be really cool. Like, it's the story part of it.
Okay. Do you know why the third season is just so bad?
No, not really.
Basically, the fans sent in a letter writing campaign.
Okay.
And well, the thought was the myth is that the fans were so upset by the cancellation, they wrote in all these letters, and NBC was flooded with letters. The truth is that did happen, but Roddenberry leaked it to the fans and basically like rallied them. But NBC said, okay, we'll renew it, but we're going to put it on Friday night. And I don't know if you know anything about ratings, but the Friday night is often referred to as the death slot because everybody's out on date night. Everybody's, off at restaurants hanging out. No one's watching TV.
Mm-hmm.
But so he said, if you put it on Friday night, I'm going to leave. And they did it anyway. And he left. And I think another producer left. I want to say it was Gene L. Kuhn, who was really probably one of the big masterminds of the original series, more than Roddenberry, but myths are what they are. And they just slashed the crap out of the budget. So the third season was basically a bunch of people coming in and writing stories and the actors fighting for, no, this is what they would do instead. We're not going to do this, so. Yeah. But I think there are some real gems in the third season. I love the Enterprise incident.
They weren't all terrible episodes.
Just a lot of them.
Yeah.
Castro Garcia on Twitter says there are parts that show how unfortunately low budget the show was. Are you willing to bypass it, overlook it completely, or do you accept it? Are you good with what they did? Are you going to be upset that they sort of retcon it later? At least the aesthetics of it.
I mean, I definitely accept what they did. I think seeing the ingenuity and the creativity of the set designers and like the makeup people is really impressive, and I applaud them for it. And I wouldn't want to just like take that away and replace it all with CGI. I am always going to choose practical effects over CGI. As far as retconning things, I don't know. I guess it depends on how they do it. I haven't seen where these things are retconned yet, so I don't feel like I can comment very well on that.
That's fair. Zalana on Instagram wants to know, what are your thoughts on the various women's costumes used for both shows?
Oh, the women's costumes. They are hardly there. Those are my thoughts. They should be more there. I was really surprised. That is one thing I was really surprised about, was the women's costumes and how consistently they were wearing almost nothing. Yeah.
Did you notice, and this is not part of her question, but I will ask you, because there's a range of reactions to those photos. I mean, not to those photos, to those costumes. But if you notice, I don't know if you noticed, when they did like the menagerie, or I don't know if you watched the full pilot for the cage, but they showed most
like fighting like gladiator style.
No, that was Pike. That was like with the big bulb headed aliens, Captain Pike, and there was a whole episode called the Menagerie, or 2 episodes, where they were showing what happened in that original pilot that they shot.
Oh, okay.
Spock's previous captain.
Okay.
Notice the women were not wearing those mini skirts. They were wearing like full trousers and sweaters like the men.
Interesting. Oh, yeah.
And then even on the original series, you would see the women in mini skirts mostly, but there were also still women in the background from time to time that were wearing the full pants get up. So like, I don't know if that was like something the studio was like, you've got to get this sexed up for broadcast, or if it was Roddenberry going, hey, I'm a lech, because he totally was. I don't know which part of it. And then you also have like people like ironically Grace Lee Whitney, who played Janice Rand on the first 6 or so. She was actually supposed to be a main character, and basically a producer that has been forever unnamed accosted her and tried to get her to sleep with him, and then she got fired because she would not. So But she has even said like she liked the costumes. She liked the miniskirt. She thought it, it was cute. It was sexy. They wanted to wear that. And again, it was the 60s. It was, the women's movement, and we have a right to, you know, be cute and sexy instead of like, let me wear, some dowdy dress or whatever from Father Knows Best.
Yeah.
So like, what do you think about that?
As far as the like uniforms with the mini skirts, I thought those were fine. I can see those being like cute and fun to wear. It's
Mm-hmm.
the alien women that were like all in bikinis that I thought
Yeah.
was like a stretch and a lot.
Sometimes it was a stretch. Yeah. Like literally. Sometimes it was just bad. Like it wasn't,
Yeah.
it
Like
didn't have,
that could not be comfortable or functional.
yeah. Or like from the Gamesters of Triskelion, the lady who had like the aluminum bikini. It
Yes.
looked like aluminum foil.
Yes.
And I'm like, you're not fighting anyone in a ring wearing that.
Right.
You are wearing an aluminum diaper, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
My sister Brittany
Mm-hmm.
Robertson wants to
Okay.
know. She actually has several questions throughout this interview, but
Great.
only one for now. Was
Okay.
there a point in the original series where you considered stopping?
I would say yes and no.
Uh-huh.
I didn't like actually consider maybe I won't keep watching this.
Mm-hmm.
But by default I almost did stop watching like 4 times during season 3. I watched season 1 and 2 pretty consistently like over maybe the course of like a year or something. And then it took me about 4 years to finish season 3 because I kept watching and I would get bored and then I would stop and I would forget and then I would watch again and finally I have now finished it.
That's rough, man. That it took you 4 years or whatever to watch one season.
Yeah, well, like as I said, I got bored and so I stopped watching and then I forgot about it. But hey, I was committed, so I never decided, I won't watch anymore. I always had in my mind, I'm gonna finish it. It just took a really long time to do.
Fair enough. So I'm gonna give you a little background on what I was talking about earlier with the changes with the retcon. So a lot of people have kind of an issue with this, some more than others, obviously. I myself, I have a few different ways of looking at it that gets me through my life. But so from 1966 to 2005, the original series era had the original series aesthetic. Like the technology that was presented was what we saw in the original series. They remained faithful to that all the way to 2005. Whenever they went back and showed anything from that era, it looked like the original series.
Mm.
Even to the point on Enterprise, they rebuilt the sets and kind of added some very small details to be like, hey, look, you didn't know that this was here, but it still looks the same, but it's updated for HD. Cool. So in the series that have come out in the last 5 years, starting with Discovery, the aesthetic and the technology, because Discovery happens like 10, 15 years before the original series, something like that. I think 10 is fair. They have shown that the technology, without explicit explanation, it has been drastically updated. Despite producers promising that it is still the same universe, is still the same timeline. Like I said, there are things that have, come out. Well, even before Discovery, Enterprise was kind of based around this idea of a temporal Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
And now, in Discovery, they've talked about temporal wars happening. And, we've seen time travel even in the original series. So I just kind of assume, some time travel shenanigan made that's my headcanon officially, is that the time travel has made the technology a little different, a little more upgraded.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're moving forward with. But the original stuff had to happen for them to get
Right.
to a point in the future where they had a time where they did time travel back and changed everything. Like, does that confuse you? Does that anger you? Does that you just don't care? What do you think?
Like the difference in how they portray it in the more recent series?
Yeah. Like, do you think that would bother you?
Well, again, I haven't watched it yet, so
Right.
I don't know how well I can comment on it. But the idea of them showing it one way for 50, 60 years and then
Mm-hmm.
suddenly changing it. Yeah, that bothers me a little bit if there's not like an explanation in universe for it. I think it'd be different if, as technology in the real world updated, they showed things with gradually updated technology matching the
Yeah.
time that it was recorded in. But if they like have it look like stuff made in the 60s and then suddenly it looks like it's made in 2020,
Yeah.
that's a bit jarring.
Right. Yeah. And like what you're talking about before is like it's what they do in the movies. It's like the movies look like they're made in the late 70s and 80s.
Hmm.
They just they've got the computer screens with the green writing, and it looks like the 80s.
Yeah.
A lot of TNG looks like the 90s.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much, like, some people don't care about this and get angry with me for even mentioning it, so I'll move on. But I was just curious. I don't know what kind of fan you're going to be. I'm trying to figure out what kind of fan you're going to turn out to be.
You can ask me again in 20 years when I get through the rest of the Star Trek series.
You're like, I don't care. I've got like 16 Marvel series to watch this year. Um, so do you feel like the characters on TOS and the animated series have any kind of character arc or character development? Can you see, like, is there a start point and an end point to you?
I want to say there is, but as I've mentioned, I took a really long time to watch the
Yeah.
series. It's hard to remember how the characters really were in season
Mm-hmm.
one versus the end of season 3 or in the animated series. I want to say that there was some growth in them as far as how they related to each other. Like that they, became more comfortable with each other or like
Mm-hmm.
got to know each other better and how they influenced each other. Like I think, the whole thing with Spock and Bones fighting, I feel like there were moments when they like had agreements and where they grew and they learned from each other. And then as far as like Spock and Kirk go, I think they really grew together, like as far as how they worked together and helped each other and supported each other. And like, if I want to say maybe the most development is seen in Spock because we do get to see some of his past in that
Mm-hmm.
episode in the animated series, and then the 1 or 2 episodes in the original series that explore his background.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, like, I don't know, like, I'm one of the things that's very interesting about all this is that, like, you have not spent your entire life analyzing the show.
That is correct.
So for
I've
me,
not spent much time at all analyzing the
yeah,
show.
so, and I have,
Right.
so like, I'm like, oh, well, when you look at like Where No Man Has Gone Before, or when you look at The Cage or Menagerie, Flashback, whatever, Spock is actively smiling when he sees a vibrating singing plant. And then in early episodes with Kurt, he's still kind of smirking and smiling. He's like smirking at the dudes falling over themselves for Mud's women, all of that kind of stuff. And then later he's just very stoic. We do not have emotions. And then, there's the progression of like becoming more comfortable
Hmm.
with crew members, like the more he opens up to them.
Yeah.
And especially with certain things that are going on in Strange New Worlds right now, where you're just like, Spock really was, and it makes sense that this was the way it was, but people don't think about it. When you look at like the Where No Man Has Gone Before, and Kirk asks him if he's irritated, and Spock says, irritated. Ah, yes, one of your Earth emotions. Dude has been serving for like 15, 20 years at this point, at least,
Yeah.
around humans. Like he knows what irritation is, but he's
Hmm.
just really been messing with people. Like he loves messing with new humans that he doesn't really have familiarity with.
Hmm.
So I think by the end of the original series, you're seeing like, Spock is like, Vulcans don't lie, Vulcans don't lie. Well, I exaggerated here.
Hmm.
Well, he's willing to open up to be more human. And then when they call him on it, he's like, that's an insult. Nah. But it's
Uh-huh.
like, it's more of that, that bond forming. I don't really think anybody had much character development except for Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. They didn't have a huge amount.
Yeah.
But moving on. I don't know. I think I do want to ask you this. Brittany wants to know what character development, if any, was the most interesting for you to watch. But I want to know, in sort of, because you kind of answered that in the same vein, though, how much different was it for you, or which one do you prefer, I guess, more? Because when you look at the Chris Pine movies,
Yeah.
He is this. He doesn't have his dad growing up. It's an alternate reality.
Mm-hmm.
His dad's killed. He's kind of like this, rebel without a cause type of guy. Winds up becoming a cadet and goes from cadet to captain in one mission.
Right.
Whereas on the original series, you had like Kirk's best friend Gary Mitchell in Where No Man Has Gone Before saying that he was in Lieutenant Kirk's class, and described Lieutenant Kirk as a stack of books with legs. And in Court Martial, we had all of these like commendations and all of this stuff. Like we've heard of all these ships he's served on and all these medals he's won. He's a very serious, dedicated officer, very much not Chris Pine's version of Kirk. Right. And like, how much did you like or dislike that in relation?
I would say, yeah, I really liked it because like it was already there and it was cool to see him, as that captain and as like the leader he had become. Mm-hmm. But then on the other hand, I did really like in the Chris Pine movies seeing a different version of him and how, like you could imagine him getting there. Like how you could imagine that young student and like kid with not such great conduct getting to such a point of leading and piloting, captaining a starship, and having so many people be so loyal to him. So I really I liked seeing him be that leader, but I think they're both like fun versions of the character.
Yeah, I feel like there's some kind of like nature versus nurture point in there that they never really quite hit upon. They never like, it's just there for us to kind of go, okay, like I want to see more, but that would require someone like Nimoy's Spock still being like, this is what's interesting, but he's no longer with us, and they were never going to go into all that on those movies. Stu Little on Twitter wants to know who's your favorite supporting crew member outside of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy.
I'd say Chekhov.
Really?
Yeah.
More than Mr. Scott?
Oh, okay. I do love Mr. Scott. I mean, they're both great. I really love the both of them. I love Sulu as well, but Chekhov, I feel like he has a lot of really funny stories, like I mentioned before, that emphasize his youth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, Mr. Scott is also really funny, but he is more mature and like really reliable. But there are some fun stories with Chekhov where it's like, oh yeah, that's right. He's kind of a kid.
Yeah, I do enjoy Chekhov.
Yeah.
Spectre of the Gun is one of those highlights of season 3 for me, when they're stuck on the planet with like, it's just like the front of old Western town buildings. Do you remember those?
Yeah. Yes.
It's very Chekhov heavy episode. All right. So I'm going to apologize for this question. I'm pretty sure it was Matt, my co-host on this show. But through MCU podcast on Instagram, they ask, did you find Kirk sexy?
I would say no.
Right answer.
Especially not with, sometimes it was really hard to take him seriously.
Yeah.
And I would say no.
Do you know Joan Collins, who played Edith Keeler on the City on the Edge of Forever? This is the woman who remember when they jumped through the Guardian of Forever and went back to like 1930s New York or whatever?
Yes.
Okay.
That was a really cool episode.
That's one of my favorite episodes, but if not my favorite. But she said she went in and she was very, very like excited to meet William Shatner because she had this crush on him or whatever. And she was looking around, she couldn't see him, and she saw this little pudgy bald man go into a dressing room, and it never even occurred to her that it was him. And then all of a sudden, like a few hours later or whatever, she noticed that this guy, the same dude, but it's like him now, coming out with the hair, and he's got the girdle on. And she just remembered being so disappointed. And apparently, according to Herb Solo, there are memos. You can find memos where he is complaining that Shatner kept stealing the toupees. Like at the end of the season, Shatner would steal all the because they were expensive toupees.
Oh my gosh.
And he would steal them, and then they would have to like throw more budget into his toupees. I think that's also why the toupees got worse as the show went on, because they were like, we're not going to keep spending money on him to just steal them.
Oh my gosh.
All right. One of the ongoing jokes about the original series is that Kirk is this like misogynistic hound dog, always running around after all these women, bedding a new woman every episode. Mm-hmm. Do you find that to be true? Like for real, for real.
Okay, I think it was ridiculous how many women he fell in love with. And very unbelievable. But there was also the nature of the Star Trek episodes seeming to not be directly connected to each other. Like you could watch a lot of them out of order and it wouldn't make a lot of difference.
Yeah.
They kind of did that whole thing that happens in episodic shows where like, okay, well, this happened and then we're never going to mention that again. You know, like there were some elements that carried through. So if you want to give it that and say that gives a little bit of a pass, you could. But at the end of the day, yeah, he was crazy and it was ridiculous how many women he fell madly in love with.
Yeah. I think when you actually look at it, it's like 79 episodes and he kissed 19 women in those 79 episodes, which is way less than, because a lot of people say like every episode. It's 19.
For most of the women he kissed in season 3, because I felt like in season 3 it was every
episode. Probably. But
and that's what's most recent for me.
I think it's it's weird to look at that because it's like he kissed 19 women, and I think we have like maybe 2 or 3 confirmations of actual, intercourse going on. And of course, because it's the 60s, we just see him zipping up a boot. But after the break, but most of the women that he's with, if he's not like trying to like, if he's not pushed up against a wall and he's like, oh no, I've got to figure out a way to get my crew safe. Let me try to, play on this girl's emotions. If it's not that, like he more, I would say, seems like a serial monogamist, because like they'll bring on some woman who he was in a relationship with for 4 years. Right. And she's like, well, you chose the stars over me or something. And that's always his thing. Like he tells, I think her name was Lenora. He says, I already have a woman in my life. Her name is the Enterprise. Yeah. And in like Naked Time, he's like weeping and talking about how he doesn't have, he can't show weakness to the crew. He has to be the captain. He doesn't have time for romance and stuff. I think that's just all that's really interesting. Like in contrast to like, I think it was a 3rd season episode, I'm pretty sure, where he falls in love with that stupid android woman.
That one. Yeah. I keep thinking about that episode. It was so ridiculous.
And like he knows her
for like a few hours, and then he was just absolutely distraught, heartbroken. Life can't go on unless I can forget about her.
And Spock had to like erase his memory of
it. Yes.
But yeah, anything. It feels like overall, it just feels like Kirk is actually just really like a serial monogamist who's super needy.
Yeah.
But still can't like stop exploring.
I do think, more often than not, it was the woman who was pursuing him. Yeah. And then once he finally gave in, he fell madly in love with each one of them.
Yeah. And I think it's, again, an interesting contrast to the Chris Pine version of the character, who is just like lacking the ladies. He can't even have a conversation with McCoy in the courtyard of Starfleet Academy without stopping and looking at some ladies. I'm like,
it almost feels like they wrote the Chris Pine Kirk to be what people want to say that the William Shatner one is.
I absolutely think that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that's what they did. Like, oh, this is the public perception. Let's do that.
Right.
So which one do you prefer? Do you prefer
of the two of them?
Yeah.
I mean, as far as the actors go, I would definitely choose Chris Pine. But the characters, maybe William Shatner's. I would say, if you were to compare them, I would say that William Shatner's version is more respectful towards women. Even though he falls madly in love with each one who makes an advance on him.
Yeah. Or at least pretends to get his crew out of trouble.
Right.
Joseph Baker, Mr. Joseph W. Baker on Twitter wants to know, what's your favorite episode and why is it Balance of Terror?
Okay, I'm sorry, but first of all, which episode is that? Because I don't know the
Balance of
title.
Balance of Terror is the one where they're like whispering on the ship like they're in a submarine, because apparently at that point the writers didn't know that you can't hear through space. That's the one where they meet the Romulans. They've never seen a Romulan before, and then it turns out they look like Vulcans.
Okay,
Do you remember this?
kind of.
Balance of Terror is not one of my favorites.
Okay,
I
I
think
would
it's pretty
say
good.
probably, it's yeah. I want to say it was a good episode, but I don't really remember it very well.
Yeah.
One of the ones that's most memorable to me would be the one where they time travel and they meet, like, don't they meet one of Kirk's old girlfriends or Spock's old girlfriends? Something like
You're making it more open to different episodes now. Are you talking about the one where they go where they jump through the donut and they go into the 30s and meet the
Yes.
girl? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whose girlfriend is it? I know they meet a girl with a history with someone.
They meet Edith Keeler, who runs a homeless shelter.
Okay.
And she's supposed to die. And if she doesn't, she stops America from entering World War II, and the future never happens.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So he has to let her die.
Okay. Well, that was a really cool episode. I like the episodes where they use actual outdoor environments on real Earth.
Yeah. Do you know what that town was, what that set was?
No, I don't.
That was Mayberry from the Andy Griffith Show. They walk, you can see them in the episode, walk by the courthour's, walk by Floyd's barber shop.
That's awesome.
The little TV repair.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just one of they did this. It was the same set in the episode Miri, where they go to the planet where all the grown-ups were dead from that virus, and when the kids hit puberty, same town. Too. They boarded up all the buildings.
That's great. I also liked the one with evil Kirk.
The Enemy Within.
I think so. Is that where there are like two versions of him? One who's like really kind and timid, and then the other one who's just like William Shatner going crazy.
Yeah.
That one was great too.
Yep. That's a fun episode. I'm Captain Kirk.
Yes.
I don't know what the deal is with this name is, but Queen of Flatulence.
Okay.
At Queen of Fart on Twitter. Welcome to the internet.
Great.
Wants to know specifically, what are your thoughts on Chekhov's hair?
Oh, his hair?
Uh-huh.
It was awful. That poor boy. What did they do to him?
I feel like we did cover that to some degree, but just to get you on record.
Yes.
That poor boy.
Yes, that poor boy. His hair was awful. I'm so sorry for him.
All right. My sister Brittany has a series of questions. Which season of TOS holds up the best?
Not season 3.
Obviously.
I don't know which to choose between season 1 and 2 because I don't remember specifically like where one started and the other ended.
Okay.
In my mind, it's like season 1 and 2 and season 3.
Right. I generally say season 2 because I feel like season 1 is when they were still trying to like figure it out a little bit, like the characters and how they acted and stuff.
Right.
And then season 2.
Her shirt would be?
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's, well, are you talking about the green wraparound?
Yes.
Yeah. That's just a thing. I don't know. I don't know who came up with that. Apparently, there was something about like I don't know how true it is, but apparently those gold uniforms actually all were like a shade of green.
Oh.
And because of the lighting and everything, it just always looked gold. So like canonically now command officers wear gold or red in the Next Generation times. But that gold shirt is gold because the set lights and color grading and everything just weren't up to snuff. And I'm glad it's not green. I hate that green wraparound that he's got.
It's awful. Yeah.
Yeah, I hate it. But anyway, she wants to know, how do you think the animated series stands up against the original series?
I loved the animated series. I thought it was fantastic. I think it stands up very well against the original series. And I love the stories in it. And as I mentioned before, I really like the visuals, like in that they could be more imaginative with the form that aliens took and with the environments that they were in.
Mm-hmm.
However, I will say that the animation quality was kind of awful.
Yeah, it was like
And there were a
Hanna-Barbera
lot of
knockoff.
what was the deal with like half of every episode being a shot of half of someone's face in the lower left corner of the frame?
Yeah, I don't know.
Honestly, I think the animated series could be consumed as an audio drama and be as enjoyable as actually watching it, because some of the visuals and like the stilted quality of the animation is so bad.
I wish they would.
Yeah,
I wish they would take the audio and just do CGI, completely
totally.
CGI episodes, like, troll hunters and stuff,
Yeah. Like remake it with the original audio, reanimate it. Because they totally could do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think they could.
Great.
It could be the animated series
as,
remastered.
Yeah, totally. Like as far as animation goes, sorry, not animation, as far as story goes and plot and the characters, like they had the original cast. So yeah, I thought it was really great. I loved the stories. I thought it had the same like vibes as the original series, all except for Captain Kirk's flailing about with his, special brand of acting. That was lacking a little bit.
Yeah, he was a little more wooden in the animated series.
Right. As was everyone.
Did I ever tell you about when they were shooting Star Trek 6? Picard. Kirk is supposed to have this very he's having this very heated conversation with Spock in the movie, and the director Nicholas Meyer was just like, Shatner keeps overacting, so he just kept making him do the scene over and over and over again until he got so tired he did it really subtle. Like he was just tuckered. He was just all tuckered out, and he actually gave like an understated performance, and he was like, that's the one. Great. And that's how William Shatner's a better actor in the movies.
Because they worked him to death.
They worked him to death and tired him out. Like a little kid, just let her go play, and then we'll do what we need to do. Wear her out. Brittany also wants to know, what storyline from either show would you want to see continued or referenced in the new Trek series?
Well, as I mentioned, I would love to see a continuation of Spock's story, especially the animated series one when he was a kid and everything.
Well, they referenced that heavily in the J.J. Abrams movie.
They did, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. It would be cool to see more about Kirk's past as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's that one episode where they reference him growing up on like a colony with like a really bad dictator dude.
Oh yeah, well, it was during that massacre.
Yeah. I mean, that seems really interesting. Like I want to know more about that, and why is he seemingly not more traumatized than he should be?
I think he's pretty traumatized. I think a lot of his weird relationship stuff is part of that. Like there's a lot of like weird stuff. And of course, that's all headcanon for me. I think, where you just kind of look at it and go, well, that could be an explanation for,
right. So I would like to like actually make canon then, like explored more on screen.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I can't really speak to it because it hasn't happened yet, but they have cast a new actor for Kirk, for a young Kirk in the current Strange New Worlds, which happens some 10 years before the original series. So we'll see how that plays out. I don't know. I think mostly what you have in your future is Kirk learns to be middle-aged, and it is not happy. They actually do a really good job with like, I'll let you see it. I'll be very interested to see what you think about the movies going forward. Okay. Because that's some of my best stuff to me. Like we've seen him in his prime. I like seeing them when they're like fallen and they're a little broken.
Yeah.
Brittany wants to, did watching the original series and the animated series make you want to watch The Next Generation?
Okay, I do want to watch The Next Generation. But I don't know if I would say that the original series made me want to watch it.
Okay.
I mean, the original series and the animated series were great, and I do want to see more Star Trek, but I already wanted to continue watching and watch more things before watching them. Like I decided I wanted to watch everything.
Yeah. Well, you're one of us.
I am a completionist, so
Yes.
yeah.
One of us. Does it, and this is for me, does the idea that like this is a show that's not about Kirk and Spock and those people, does that make you kind of go like a little bit? Or are you having trouble with that? Because that was very much a thing in 1986 when it was announced, and people were like, "You can't do Star Trek without Kirk."
Yeah, I would say yes and no. Because I started watching Star Trek the original series knowing that there are multiple Star Trek series and that all of them have a different crew, right?
Most of them, yeah.
Mostly. So like I had that in my mind to start with. Like, okay, I'm going to watch this one. This will be all I get of these characters, most likely. And then it will be like more characters set in the same universe.
Yeah.
So I had that. But generally speaking, when I start watching something and I get attached to those characters, and then another series is coming out and they're like, oh, it's in the same universe, but it's like 1,000 years later and you don't get to see any of the characters you love anymore, I'm generally uninterested in it.
Yeah, that was a real struggle for me, not with Star Trek, but with Power Rangers.
Yes.
Where it was like every 3 years, I'm like, that's another crew. It's another group of kids. Oh, man.
Tommy being in multiple series helped me to keep loving Power Rangers. But once Tommy stopped being in it, I just couldn't get into it anymore.
Yeah. Even as bad as it was, I watched it until I was about 16. Because I was just like, no, I'm watching the universe. That's what I'm doing. And then like Lost Galaxy killed me. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. So, like, because Power Rangers in Space was like the perfect ending where like they shattered Zordon's tube and like made all the bad guys good. So they had to go to another galaxy to find evil again. And then later on, because I fell off, and then later on I was like, wait, Tommy's been back over and over again this whole time?
Yeah, there was a point in my life when I realized that Tommy had shown up multiple times and I felt like I'd been missing all these things. And I just wanted to go watch all the Tommy episodes.
Yep.
He really is the lifelong real life Power Ranger though, that guy.
Yeah. Did you see that the guy that played Jason just got arrested for like wire fraud or something?
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. Anyway, this is about a Star Trek thing. This is a Star Trek show. We'll have to start a Power Rangers rewatch podcast together.
It's like a plan.
Oh gosh, that sounds awful. We'll be reviewing every episode of Power Rangers. No, we won't. Ugh.
You could watch the original Japanese versions and see what you think of those.
Dude, I am very, very curious.
I know a lot of things. It would be actually really interesting, but I doubt there is an English subbed version anywhere for you.
Yeah,
it might be part of the fun, make you watch them and not understand anything.
Yeah, I looked about 12, 13 years ago. I was hot and heavy on the search for the originals, and I could never really find anything that I could really consume, or at the very least in order. There was no availability, random things on sketchy websites, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm just gonna not do that. But I've heard things. Brittany wants to know who is your favorite Star Trek foe so far?
Favorite foe?
Are you a Harry Mudd gal? A Khan fan?
Okay, well, I would be partial to Khan because I really love Benedict Cumberbatch. I know he's not the original Khan. I'm aware. Yeah. I mean, he's like a really good character, though. Khan is a really fantastic character.
What did you think of Montalban versus Cumberbatch? Did you still like Cumberbatch more?
Well, yeah, but I'm biased in favor of Cumberbatch, so I feel like I can't make a fair comparison between the two of them.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I don't think you can really, choose between the two until you see Wrath of Khan.
This is true. I haven't seen all that the original one has to offer. So
yeah, that's where Montalban really shines. That's some of my favorite Khan stuff.
Awesome.
So I did like Cumberbatch, and
good. I'm glad.
I like Cumberbatch and everything he's in.
He's great.
I don't think he should have played Khan. I think he should have been a different villain or something.
Okay.
Also, I think that movie was I think it's funny because he says, he in that movie he's like, my name is Khan, and the crew has the exact reaction the audience does. Who's that? What does that mean? Because those movies weren't aimed at us, or my kind.
Yeah.
And like even in Space Seed, they were like, I don't know who that is. Let's look it up.
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's that eugenics guy. Oh,
Uh-oh.
yeah. And Abrams kept saying he's not Khan. He's not Khan. He's Khan. We all knew. We knew he was Khan. Liar. So, I don't know who my favorite foe from that era is. I'm very partial to the Romulan commander from Balance of Terror.
Mm.
But a lot of that is because he was Mark Leonard, the same guy who played Spock's dad, Sarek.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But I really loved that. One of my favorite bits is like as his ship is exploding at the end, he's talking about how like in another life he and Kirk could have been friends
Yeah.
because of how they were besting each other and how they were great strategists and stuff. And
Yeah.
like I really like he was a really cool, empathetic foe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I always like that. Brittany wants to know, what episode do you love to hate? Just an overall bad episode that you have a soft spot for. And she does say that might be a question for a more seasoned Trekkie, but her personal favorite episode to love to hate is A Wolf in the Fold, where Scotty is accused of murder, and then it turns out it's like alien Jack the Ripper. And
oh yeah, that
Jack the
one.
Ripper was an alien.
Yeah, that was great. In that it was awful. Okay, well, there were 2 episodes in season 3 that stand out to me as particularly memorable and maybe awful. One of them is the one with the space hippies where Spock plays a harp.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That one was like really terrible.
Yeah, it is.
And then the one with the android lady.
Yeah.
And that like was, every notable person from Earth history.
I like that premise. I like that part of the premise.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's really neat that there's like this ageless dude.
Yeah.
Who was like all the people.
Right.
But the android woman.
She kind of ruined it.
And her storyline with Kirk was just, what are we doing, y'all? This is the worst. I think I don't know if it's my favorite to hate. My least favorite one is I believe it's called The Empath with the mute woman.
Oh.
And basically it just looks like season 3 of Batman 66.
Where she like absorbs someone's pain.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, gosh, that one was awful.
Yeah. I usually skip it if I'm watching.
Yeah, that one's really, really bad too.
Would you, this is for me, would you like to live on this Enterprise?
You say on this Enterprise?
Yeah.
Then like this one versus one of the other ones?
I mean, from watching the series, because
I live in that environment.
Yeah, would you want to be on the Enterprise? Would you want to live on that ship and go on those adventures?
In some episodes, I'd say yes, but in other episodes, like where the entire crew falls prey to a deadly disease, and how often most of them almost die, I would maybe pass on that opportunity.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. Yeah,
but it would be nice to have the what is it? Is it called a replicator?
Yeah,
the thing that just like makes whatever you want, whatever food you want. I've always wanted those. That'd be great.
Yeah, but of course, the more you get into Star Trek, the more you see that they always say like the replicator doesn't really make good food. Like it makes passable food. It doesn't taste like, it doesn't get everything right,
Okay.
Like on Deep Space Nine, Captain Sisko like has like a little garden in his quarters that he tends so that he can make real food.
Interesting.
It's not as good. His dad's a chef, so he was like, that replicator. That ain't it. But yeah, I like microwave dinners, so I want a replicator. Do you have anything else that you'd like to talk about that you want to get off your chest about the original series or the animated series before we close it out? Something that I didn't cover.
Oh, one thing about the animated series, did they have any other voice actors besides like the main people?
No, not really. I don't think so.
I could definitely tell. Was the lady who does Uhura, was she the only female voice actor? Because I'm pretty sure she was the only female voice actor.
No, there was also Roddenberry's wife, Majel Barrett, who played Nurse Chapel.
Oh, okay. Well, then 2 of them then.
Yeah. I think there was only those 2, but there may have been more. I can't remember.
Okay.
I know Jimmy Doohan, the guy that played Scotty, played a lot of characters.
Yeah.
It was kind of rough.
A little bit.
But, you know.
And also from the animated series, the pterodactyl noise. The noise of anything that flies.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
So many times. Oh my gosh. They didn't even like change the pitch or anything. They just like repeated the exact same noise again and again and again.
Yeah, that tracks. Sounds right.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that complaint / or is it a thing that you love? I don't
think I'd say either. It was an observation that I thought, oh, okay.
All right. Here's one from me, I'll say. I think when they do like there are times in the animated series where I feel like the Enterprise looks better than it ever did on the original unremastered series.
I totally agree.
Where it's just like beautifully.
I don't know the unremastered series. I agree that it looks better than it did on whatever I watched on Netflix.
Yeah. I mean, it's like beautifully rendered. It's just gorgeous. There are times where it looks like old-timey sci-fi painted novel covers and stuff. And then there's other times where it looks like, 4 lines squiggled together. And I'm like, I don't know what that's supposed to be.
Oh, and one more thing from the animated series. Okay, I think it would have improved the look of the characters drastically if they had given the poor people scleras, like the whites of their eyes. None of them had scleras. Yeah. They all only had pupils.
Yeah.
And eyelids. Like, they looked so weird when they did the close-ups that they did for half of every episode with the face in the corner of the screen.
But that is like every animated show from that time.
Well, it looked strange. I didn't like it.
Like Hanna-Barbera did that crap. I don't know if you've ever seen like Herculoids and Space Ghost and all that, but they did that there too. And Filmation was definitely like the poor man's Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah.
It was like, how many times were we going to see that one shot of like Kirk going like this? And then, like where he's just sort of got his arms up and like rushing towards the camera.
When he would put his hand on his face and it would just like, they wouldn't even show him moving his hand. It would be like, it's not there. And then the next frame it's there. And it looks like it's detached from his body. Yeah.
It's weird. Yeah, man. I think it was like 1973 when they put out the animated series. So, hey, it is what it is. Are you going to come back and talk with me about your thoughts on Star Trek: The Motion Picture?
Sure.
Or do you just want to do like the first 6 movies and then talk about it?
Well, if you want to have clearer thoughts from me, it's probably better to do one movie at a time.
Okay, that's fair. And it'll be, just one like 2-hour film. So it won't be like an hour and 35 minutes or whatever. Christy, thank you so much for being on the show. I don't have any more questions for you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been fun.
I am glad it's been fun for you because it hasn't for me.
Well, blame that on your listeners and their questions, not on my answers.
I mean, I had questions. No, I thought this was really fun and interesting. I like to hear what new people to the franchise have to say. Because
have I been upgraded from an outsider to a new person?
Whatever it is. You're an outsider until you've seen every bit of it. I am the gatekeeper. No, I don't think I remembered that you had seen the J.J. Abrams movies.
Mm-hmm.
So it went from being like, hey, a newcomer to the franchise to, because one of these people who saw that first. And because then it makes it interesting.
I've watched them multiple times.
It makes it interesting in a different way. Because there's like this whole group of Trek fans who hate those movies and are angry that that's what people's impression of Star Trek is, who have never seen it before. And I'm like, does that Star Trek serve a purpose? Like,
it does. It brings new people into the franchise.
Thank you. That is my belief as well.
That's me. I never would have watched anything, I don't think, if I hadn't gotten into those movies.
Like, I know it's anecdotal, but I was at Walmart one night, shortly after the first Chris Pine movie came out, and there was this girl, and she was, I don't know, looked to be about 19 to 20, on the phone with her boyfriend. And she was like, I think I'm about to buy the original Star Trek show because I kind of want to watch it. I just watched because since we saw the movie. And I thought,
yeah.
Well, there it is.
Yeah, there you go.
And anecdotal evidence, but I do wish I'd been like, hey, I'm not a creeper. Here's my number. Tell me what you thought. I'm really interested. It's, I'm a tall guy. I'm like 6'4", big guy. Already with a normal sized guy, it's creepy. Just come up and be like, hey, here's my number. Give me a call when you're finished with this TV show. Mm-hmm. But you got to throw in this, hey, I'm not a creeper.
It's true.
And I'm pretty sure that's like the first signal that says that you are as well. So that's what all the creepers say. I'm like, legitimately, I just want to talk about Star Trek. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Anyway, thank you for being on the show and indulging me in this ridiculous question and answer session. And I am glad that you are at least enjoying it on a level enough to go further.
Yes, me too.
All right, Joe Lontrue, live long and prosper, all the things. See you guys later.
Thank you for listening to the Star Trek Universe Podcast, a Stranded Panda production. If you'd like to hear more from David C. Robertson, check out the DC On Screen podcast or maladjusted.tv for his web videos. If you'd like to hear more from Matthew Carroll, check out the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast or listen to his music. Just search for Matthew Carroll anywhere you get music.